10,000 years ago on the shores of Lake Turkana, a pregnant woman sat bound and helpless as obsidian-tipped arrows flew overhead, her unborn child destined to become part of humanity's oldest recorded massacre. Forget everything Hollywood has taught you about prehistoric battles. There were no epic sword clashes, no rousing speeches before charging into combat. The reality was far more brutal, far more calculated, and absolutely nothing like the movies. What we're about to explore will shatter your assumptions about our ancient ancestors. Were early humans peaceful hunter-gatherers living in harmony, or were they capable of organized, systematic violence that would make modern warfare seem tame by comparison? Today, we're rediving deep into the archaeological evidence to uncover what really happened when our ancestors went to war. The story begins not with bronze swords or iron shields, but with sharpened sticks and deadly precision that would determine which human species survived and which vanished forever. Our journey into prehistoric violence begins in the caves of Spain, where archaeologists made a disturbing discovery. 400,000 years ago, long before anatomically modern humans even existed, someone committed what appears to be the earliest recorded lethal interpersonal violence in hominin history. Cranium 17, found at Cima de los Huesos, bears two distinct depression fractures on its frontal bone. Forensic analysis reveals these wounds were likely caused by the same object in two separate strikes, suggesting a deliberate intention to kill in a face-to-face confrontation. But this was just individual violence. The question that haunted archaeologists was simple. When did humans first organize into groups specifically to kill other groups? The answer came from an unexpected place, the shores of an ancient lake in Kenya, where researchers uncovered humanity's darkest secret. In 2012, archaeologists working near Lake Turkana made a discovery that would fundamentally change our understanding of human nature. Scattered across a barren landscape, they found the remains of 27 people who had died violently around 10,000 years ago. This wasn't just another archaeological site. This was a crime scene frozen in time. Dr. Marta Mirazunla from Cambridge University led the investigation that would shake the archaeological world. As she explained in the journal Nature, the deaths at Nadrak represent testimony to the antiquity of intergroup violence and war. These human remains record the intentional killing of a small band of foragers with no deliberate burial, providing unique evidence that warfare was part of the repertoire of relations among some prehistoric But what made this discovery so shocking wasn't just the violence itself. It was who the victims were and how they died. Among the 27 victims were 8 women and 6 children. Most under age 6. 12 skeletons were found in relatively complete condition, and 10 of these showed unmistakable signs of violent death. Extreme blunt force trauma to skulls and cheekbones, broken hands and ribs, arrow wounds to the neck, and stone projectile tips still lodged in the skull and chest of 2 men. Perhaps most chilling of all, 4 individuals, including a pregnant woman in her final trimester, appeared to have had their hands bound when they died. Professor Robert Foley, also from the research team, reflected on what they had found. In his words, he had no doubt it is in our biology to be aggressive and lethal, just as it is to be deeply caring and loving. A lot of what we understand about human evolutionary biology suggests these are 2 sides of the same coin. This discovery represents the earliest scientifically dated evidence of organized warfare among nomadic hunters. It shattered a long-held belief in archaeology that warfare only emerged with settled, agricultural societies who had land and resources to fight over. 10,000 years ago, this area wasn't the barren landscape we see today. It was a fertile lakeshore teeming with fish, game and edible plants. These people weren't fighting over scarce resources, they were living in abundance. The attackers carried weapons they wouldn't normally use for hunting and fishing. Multiple club sizes indicated coordinated planning. The presence of obsidian projectiles suggested the attackers came from elsewhere, specifically to carry out this assault. Dr. La noted the deliberate nature of the attack. Clubs of at least 2 sizes were used, indicating that more than one of the attackers were carrying them. Yet this discovery remains controversial within the archaeological community. Not all scientists agree with the massacre interpretation. In a response published in the same journal, anthropologist Christopher Stagnovsky and his colleagues challenged the findings. They argued that much of the supposed evidence of violence could have occurred after the bodies were buried through natural processes rather than intentional trauma. Stagnovsky's team raised fundamental questions about the interpretation. They suggested that much of the evidence of perimortem trauma, identified by Mira Zohanla, is equally, if not more, likely to have occurred after deposition. They also argued that the bodies at Nadrak are mostly articulated, spatially organized, and preserve limited variation in body positioning, all inconsistent with skeletons from well-documented massacre sites. This debate reveals something crucial about prehistoric archaeology. We're often working with fragments of evidence, trying to reconstruct events that happened thousands of years ago. The difference between a massacre and a natural disaster can sometimes come down to how we interpret microscopic fractures in ancient bone. But whether or not Nadrak represents warfare, one thing is undeniable. Our ancestors possessed weapons technology that was far more sophisticated than most people realize. Here's where the story gets really fascinating. While Neanderthals continued to rely on heavy, handheld spears that required them to get close to their prey, early modern humans had developed something revolutionary: the bow and arrow. Recent research from Gratta-Mandarin in France has pushed back the evidence for archery in Europe to 54,000 years ago. Dr. Laura Metz and her team analyzed over 1,500 tiny stone points amid a remarkable discovery. Their study in Science Advances revealed that these Neronian tiny points were undoubtedly used as arrowheads. It is the very small size and more precisely the small width of these armor, of which some 30% weigh hardly more than a few grams, which allows us to exclude any other mode of ballistic propulsion for these very small weapons. But why does this matter for understanding prehistoric battles? The technological difference between Neanderthals and modern humans was profound. Research published in BBC Science Focused explained the significance. Modern humans migrating into Europe equipped themselves with mechanically delivered projectile weapons, such as spear thrower darts or bow and arrows, which had a higher impact hunting strategy and offered modern humans a substantive advantage over Neanderthals. Think about what this means in practical terms. While a Neanderthal hunter had to get within arm's reach of a dangerous mammoth or rival human, a modern human could kill from a distance with devastating accuracy. Dr. Metz emphasized the practical advantages. Bows and arrows are more accurate and easier to use, do not require as much strength, and can be carried on the back. In addition, these weapons can be used for a variety of hunting purposes, also for fishing. This wasn't just about hunting, it was about survival itself. The technological superiority of modern humans may help explain one of prehistory's greatest mysteries: why Neanderthals went extinct while we survived. Archaeological data indicates that Neanderthals continued to rely on close contact weapons for approximately 150,000 years, showing remarkable technological stagnation. Meanwhile, modern humans rapidly innovated, developing not just bows and arrows, but complex adhesives made from ochre, plant gum, and beeswax to attach their projectile points to shafts. The study from Gratta-Mandarin revealed the stark contrast. The research shows that Neanderthals, contemporaries of Neronian modern humans, did not develop mechanically propelled weapons and continued to use massive spear-shaped points that were thrusted or thrown by hand, requiring close contact with their game. The patterns of trauma found on Neanderthal skeletons tell a story of dangerous close-quarters living, whether from hunting massive prey or direct interpersonal clashes. They show frequent skull injuries consistent with blunt force impacts and high rates of what archaeologists call on their forearms from defending against blows. Modern human skeletons from the same period show different patterns entirely, consistent with people who could kill from a distance. Dr. Metz offered a chilling perspective on the military applications. Used for combat, bows and arrows have a clear advantage. You can easily kill more people while you're away from the enemy. As we move forward in time to the Neolithic period, the evidence for organized conflict becomes more abundant and more complex.
The Tauheim death pit in Germany, dating to around 5,500 BC, reveals something unexpected about prehistoric warfare. Among the 34 skeletons found in this mass burial, no local women were among the dead, while immigrant women were present. Research suggests that the primary motive for this conflict may have been the capture of women rather than resources. This discovery challenges our assumptions about prehistoric violence. It wasn't always about survival or territory. Sometimes it was about social dynamics, reproduction, and power structures that were already surprisingly complex. Even more intriguing is evidence from sites like Paco Pampa in Peru, where archaeologists found skeletal remains with violent injuries that were clearly not warfare. The trauma pattern showed evidence of healing, indicating non-lethal violence that may have been ritualistic or ceremonial. This distinction is crucial. Not all violence was warfare, and not all conflict was about resources. Perhaps the most tangible evidence of prehistoric conflict comes from the defensive structures our ancestors built. And here's where the findings get really surprising. The world's oldest known fort isn't found in an agricultural settlement. As you might expect, it's located in Siberia and was built by hunter-gatherers around 8,000 years ago. Recent research describes the Amna Fort as the world's oldest known fort constructed by hunters. The fortified settlement comprises around 20 pit house depressions, protected by earthen walls and wooden palisades. This discovery fundamentally challenges the assumption that fortifications were exclusively associated with agricultural society. It demonstrates that even hunter-gatherers could develop the social organization and collective labor necessary for complex defensive structures. In Europe, archaeologists have recently discovered 15 new defensive settlements from the Neolithic and early Bronze Age in northern Poland alone. Some spanned over 20 hectares, with earthenwood fortifications that were structurally similar to medieval castle towns. The widespread presence of these fortifications tells us something important. Prehistoric societies lived with a constant sense of threat that was significant enough to invest enormous collective effort in defensive architecture. So what really happened in a prehistoric battle? The truth is more complex and more disturbing than any Hollywood movie. Unlike the choreographed sword fights of cinema, real prehistoric battles were likely chaotic, brief, and utterly brutal. They involved men, women, and children. They used sophisticated projectile weapons that could kill from a distance, and they were motivated by a complex mix of resource competition, social dynamics, and territorial control. The archaeological records suggest our capacity for organized violence is ancient, perhaps as old as our capacity for cooperation and love. The findings also reveal remarkable sophistication. The bow and arrow technology that gave modern humans such an advantage required complex knowledge of physics, materials science, and engineering. Creating a functional bow demands understanding of wood properties, string tension, and projectile belief. These weren't primitive savages randomly swinging clubs. These were intelligent, organized societies with advanced technologies and complex social structures. The story written in stone and bone across prehistoric sites worldwide tells us something profound about human nature. We have always been capable of both extraordinary cooperation and devastating violence, often within the same communities. Understanding this prehistoric violence doesn't glorify it. Instead, it helps us recognize that the capacity for both war and peace has deep roots in our evolutionary history. The same cognitive abilities that allowed our ancestors to develop complex projectile weapons also enabled them to create art, music, and the cooperative societies that ultimately led to civilization. Perhaps most importantly, the archaeological record shows us that despite our capacity for violence, cooperation ultimately won. The societies that survived weren't necessarily the most aggressive, but the most adaptive, the most innovative, and the most capable of working together to solve complex problems. The real lesson from prehistoric battles isn't about the inevitability of violence. It's about the choices our ancestors made and continue to make between cooperation and conflict, between innovation and stagnation, between fear and trust. As we face our own modern challenges, these ancient stories remind us that we carry within us both the capacity to destroy and the ability to build something better. The choice, as always, is ours.